share my screen. And here we go. Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's continue in the text that we had started yesterday. This is, let's see. What sif is this? This is sif ches, that if you know of a danger that is impending upon your friend, and you have the ability to save him, and you don't, so then you're oiver and lo samod al dam reach. And this is true even if he's a Jew who is a mumar, and it is a bad guy. You're still not allowed to stand idly by his blood. But then the Rav Shulchan Aruch said something surprising. He says, but the difference is that for that kind of person, you don't have to spend money in order to save him. And because he doesn't fall under the category of dam re'echa, of the blood of your fellow. And so, and as we pointed out several months ago, even a person who's not observant still qualifies as re'echa according to the 20th century poskim. But this may be a line of distinction, just as far as Ron, to Ron's point, that it may be a point of distinction between a Jew and a non-Jew. You have to save every human being, but are you obligated to expend money in order to save the life of a non-Jew? And it seems like it could be, since the Torah says dam re'echa, the blood of your fellow, and a non-Jew is not your fellow, you don't have to expend money. You're further not obligated. We're talking about now a mumar, a non-observant Jew, a Jew who violates mitzvos. You're not obligated to sustain him and to provide him with any kind of money for sustenance, because he's not included in the other biblical commandment of make sure your brother lives with you. Elo toreach levado, below hotzoas mama. But what you are still obligated to do is to make every effort to save his life, even without spending money. V'chayavim litrach b'shvil hatzalas gufo, va'afilu b'shvil hatzalas mamona. And you're obligated to exert effort to save his body, save him from bodily harm, and even to save him from property harm, save his property. Mishum shenamar l'chol avedas achicha, because the Torah says that you have a mitzvah of hashavas aveda for all that which is lost from your brother. V'darshu chachamim l'rabos avedas hamumar l'teyava. This includes, according to the Talmud, even the lost object of someone who is a mumar, so a Jew who rejects mitzvahs. But as long as he's only doing it because of his weakness for indulgence, not that he's doing it as a specific act of rebellion against God, which is what we call a mumar lahachis. V'sham ne'emar v'hashevosolo. And it also says in the pasuk, you shall return it to him. Below ne'emar v'hashevosalo. And it doesn't say return to him, which would probably have been the more economical way of expressing it. Why does the Torah use that extra vav at the end of the word v'hashevosa? V'darshu chachamim v'hashevoso oso ba'atzmo. And our sages understand that to mean that you have a mitzvah to return him to himself, meaning that you have a mitzvah to save him. She'im gufo oved lahashivo ulahatzilo. That what our sages explain is that if even a mumar's life is in danger of being lost, you have a mitzvah to save it. Shekamosha mitzvah hashavas avedas mamon hu b'torach bilvad below hotzoos mamon afilu Yisrael kasher. That he says that just like the mitzvah of hashavas aveda, to restore his property to him, only requires you to exert effort and does not require you to exert finances, and that's true even with a kosher Yisrael. Like we explained previously when we learned the laws of hashavas aveda, that a Jew, you're not required to expend exorbitant amounts of money, of your own assets, in order to save someone else's property. Kach mitzvahs hashavas avedas haguf v'hatzalaso eina ela b'torach bilvad l'mumar. Similarly, when it comes to a mumar, you're not obligated to spend your own money in order to save someone's life. All you have to do is exert yourself. The only difference being is that for a kosher Yisrael, you actually have to spend your own money in order to save his life, and even if you don't have a way of recouping the money. And that's based on the mitzvah of lo samad al dam re'echa. That's because the mitzvah of lo samad al dam re'echa is a mitzvah lo saseh. And as we know, for a mitzvah lo saseh, you're obligated to spend money in order to avoid violating a mitzvah lo saseh. Okay, v'yesh omrim shemumar l'tei avon. We can turn the next page. Hu bichlal achicha v're'echa. Some say that even a mumar l'tei avon, a guy who is not observant in mitzvos, is considered to be your brother and your fellow. K'mo shedarshu chachamim l'chol avedas achicha l'rabos hamumar l'tei avon shu bichlal achicha. And therefore, just like our sages say that you have an obligation to return lost items even to a mumar, the mitzvah of lo samad al dam re'echa would extend even to a mumar as well. Uleficha chayavim lahotzi mamon al parnasaso ve'al hatzalas gufo k'Yisrael kosher. And therefore, according to this latter opinion, you would even be obligated to spend money, even your own money, in order to save even a Machal Shabbos Jew's life. The Yirei Shamayim Yachosh L'Divreim Lahachmir Al Atzmo B'Shel Torah. And any God-fearing person should always err on the side of being machmir, so that if you need to spend money even on a person who is a mumar in order to save their life, you should do so because this is a Torah commandment. And anytime there's a suffix as to which way we paskin, you should always be paskening l'chumra. Should always be going to the more stringent side. Well, this was a very long text, but it really didn't. I don't know why the Rav Shulchan Aruch was so verbose in communicating the message. The message is simply this. Huh? Yeah, this particular sif. Well, this particular sif was particularly repetitive because what he's trying to get across is we're dealing with two different mitzvahs. We're dealing with the mitzvahs lo saseh, and we're dealing with the mitzvahs aseh. The mitzvahs lo saseh is lo samad al dam re'echa, and he establishes very clearly, at least according to the first opinion, that it does not apply to anyone except an observant Jew. Then he says, but there's a mitzvah bahashevosolo, and bahashevosolo is a positive commandment, and that, according to the Talmud, applies to a Jew, regardless of whether he's a mumar or a non-mumar, regardless of whether he's observant or a non-observant Jew. What's the difference between the two? For the mitzvah of lo samad al dam re'echa, once I know that the mitzvah does not apply to a non-observant Jew, then I don't have to spend money in order to avoid it. But if the mitzvah of hashavas aveda applies to him, right, I still have to help him. I just don't have to spend money in the course of helping him. But then he says, but in reality, there's a second opinion that says that the mitzvah of both lo samad al dam re'echa and v'hashevosolo applies to a mumar as equally as it does to a regular Jew, and therefore in all situations you have to spend your own money. But that's the bottom line. Do I have to? I mean, the point of deliberation is I always have to save someone's life, and I have to even save their property. But am I obligated to spend money on it in a situation where the person is not observant? Or let's say, like Ron's question, in a case where the person is a non-Jew. Okay, so let's take a look now at the Imrei Yaakov, where the first case that we saw is v'chenim shama nochrim o mosrim, that if you saw people who were violent, who were trying to get this guy into trouble, or trying to whack him, right? As they say in the mafia. Yeah, right. So in Sifkat Nun Ches, the Chashivim Alav, they're calculating in a way to try and get him. Rod Solomar Mechashvim al Chavero Ra'ah. In other words, they're planning to do something malevolent to him. V'lav davka b'inyan sheyesh bo sakmanas nefashos. And he says, this is not only limited to where his life is in danger, elagam b'inyan hefsid mamon hadin kein shemechuyev lahagid lav. But even if you know that someone is planning to cause him financial ruin, let's say you know that someone is trying to get him fired. So a guy's trying to get him fired from his job, or is trying to get him in trouble in some other way where he stands to lose, even though his life was never in danger. So in that situation, you have to tell someone, hey, you should know this guy's trying to cause you damage. And if not, you're in violation of the mitzvah of do not stand by your brother's blood. Duhu kolel, we go to the next page, Duhu kolel gam minias nezek mechavera. That the mitzvah of lo samad al dam re'echa applies not only to saving the obligation to save someone's life, but also applies, and we're going to see this later on in Siman Yud Gimel, applies to saving someone's finances as well. And this is a very common thing. If you know that someone's in danger of losing money because they're about to invest in something where you suspect that the person is going to be is trying to con them, you have an obligation to, and it's not this is where the issue of lashon hara comes in, where I sometimes will get the question, I know that this guy who's offering stock options to a friend is a thief and has a checkered past. Do I have an obligation to tell my friend? And the answer is yes, you do have an obligation. Once you've told him, it's, if he decides to invest anyway, that's, that you did your duty, but you still have an obligation to let him know, listen, I'm worried that this may not be a safe investment. Or you should know that I've heard your boss talking behind your back that he's not happy with your performance and you're in danger. You should really do this, this, and this. In all of those situations, you have an obligation to help someone if you see that their parnasa is in danger. Okay. So Moshe is asking, where do you draw the line? So the Chafetz Chaim, the Sefer Chafetz Chaim has a detailed discussion about that very question. And in the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, he goes through a whole list of things that you have to clarify before you share the information. Number one, you have to know it's true. And you have to have heard this. You have to have firsthand information. And you have to see if you can prevent the guy from making the mistake without disparaging your friend in the process. So you have to sort of minimize the lashon hara, like, not make it juicy and exciting.
So maybe give him some hints, like, you should check, or even more like a precaution. Okay.
Well, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes that's not enough, because if you have specific information, hey, this guy did this, and this, and it was documented in an article from 12 years ago,
Or it happened to yourself.
or it happened to you, then I don't think it's enough to hint. I think then you have to actually tell him. You need to, first of all, I want you to do your research. There's an article about this guy that you can find if you do a Google search. You'll be able to find this guy. Just Google this guy's name and this company, and you'll see exactly what he did in the past and what he was convicted of or what he was accused of doing, and then make an informed decision whether you want to still invest with him, right? Lashon hara is a d'oraisa. Yeah. Lo sisa shema shav, right? right? Is an Isser Deoraisa. Okay. Now, you only have an obligation to save a mummer l'te'avon, and I actually sort of alluded to this. Aval b'mummer lahachis, if a person is a mummer because he wishes to rebel against God, l'kuli alma ein lahatzilo kidol lakamen sifain, and we're going to learn that in the next couple of seifim. It's very hard to find in the world today a mummer lahachis, a person who is so well versed in Judaism and deliberately goes against the Torah. So it's very hard to find that where a person is, yeah, I do think so. Because he's not usually rebelling against God, he's rebelling against the system, or, like he was traumatized or whatever. And so I think in modern poskim really say it's very hard to find a mummer lahachis today. Either a tinok shenishba or a mummer l'te'avon would be the most. Yeah. Okay.
What about a self-denying Jew who's an anti-Semite?
Well, a guy could be, that he might fall under the category of a rodef, right? Someone who's trying to harm the Jewish people. And there too, you would have no longer an obligation to help that person. So if this is a person who, is the leader of Voice for Peace, or, one of these pro-Palestinian groups, maybe you could make that argument. But you have to be careful with that also. People are so misguided today. People, their politics make their minds bend like pretzels. And so I would probably not want to apply any kind of leniency to just forsake another Jew, unless it was clear that this was a high-profile Jew hater. Okay, so all right. Anyway,
Rabbi,
yeah,
with a mumar who we may not have to be obligated to financially support him, wouldn't this also extend to our approach to our tzedakah dollars? Because if the logic would be that you don't necessarily have to support secular Jewish institutions or charitable organizations.
I don't know of any secular Jewish institutions. There are very few today. So you'd have to be more specific. And the people who run those institutions are not, I don't feel they fall into the category of a mummer. They fall into the category of a tinok shenishba, like we've talked about before. The other thing that I was going to say, what was I going to say? I'm sorry, I forgot my train of thought. But yeah, I know what I was going to say. The laws of tzedakah require a person to donate to Gentile charities as well, mipnei darkei shalom, in order to preserve the peace. In other words, Jews have an obligation to have peaceful relations with the rest of non-Jewish society, and therefore have to use a certain percentage of their tzedakah dollars to support non-Jewish causes as well. I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware of that. I think we've mentioned it in the past, but it always is worth mentioning. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very important, but it's important for the average guy as well to set aside. I mean, look, I support my favorite secular charity is Sick Kids Hospital, because of, when one of my children was reliant upon the hospital at one time. So that's my favorite charity. But everyone should have a non-Jewish charity that they support. We're not saying give half of your tzedakah to that, but give maybe a percentage of your tzedakah to a non-Jewish charity as well, and make sure that the world, make sure that the world is aware of it. That we as Orthodox Jews support charities that are not just Jewish. Yeah, and or except for the Church of of so and so, right? Okay, so Ron, let's say supporting federation. I think it's important for Orthodox Jews to be supporters of the UJA. These are not mumars, the people who are running these organizations. The argument that says, well, a portion of your UJA donation goes to helping, gay and lesbian Jews have a parade or whatever it is, I think is a weak argument, because the vast majority of the money that the UJA uses is for school tuitions and sending the money to Israel for humanitarian aid. And there can't be any kind of, I can't imagine anyone saying that, well, it's not supporting Orthodox schools, it's only supporting camps for non-observant kids. Well, so what? Maybe one of those kids will have a religious experience at a conservative or reform camp and they'll become a Shomer Shabbos because of it. I mean, so it's really important. I'm not giving up psak halacha that you have to support UJA, because I don't feel it falls under the rubric of psak. Every Jew has a right to allocate their tzedakah funds as they see fit. But I would say this: if someone were to ask me, what's the proper thing to do as far as UJA, I would say every member of the Orthodox community should contribute to UJA. I'm not saying how much of your tzedakah it should be, but it should certainly be a percentage of your tzedakah. Israeli bonds, I'm a little bit more equivocal about. Number one, it's a personal investment. Number two, when Israel bonds started, it was because Israel really, really needed money from us. I think Israel's doing pretty good. I think Israel's doing better than Canada economically right now. If anything, Israelis should buy Canadian bonds instead of Canadians buying Israeli bonds. So the tables have turned, thank God. Have you looked at the exchange rate lately between the shekel and the Canada dollar? It's unbelievable how strong the shekel is. It's almost like down to 2. As far as 2 shekels per. Yeah.
It's in the US too. 3.2, 3.15.
Yeah.
And a year ago.
Well, that's just a sign that Mashiach is on the way. Yeah. That's
We didn't quite hear what the sign that Mashiach is on the way is.
sign Mashiach is on the way, that the Israeli shekel is going to become at parity with the US dollar. When that happens, we know that Mashiach side, yeah, you better pack up. Right. Okay. Next, but nonetheless, there's not an obligation to spend money on a mumar. But that's only, it's this distinction between a Jew and a mumar Jew is only if the mumar does it with regularity, that he violates the halacha. But let's say he just had one temporary moral lapse, okay? But otherwise, he's with the black hat and he comes to shul every day, and he had a lapse. He had a moral lapse. So that doesn't make him a mumar. If people with moral lapses would be defined as mumars, we'd have a shul full of mumars. I got news for you. Boy, what I know. Okay, Vidino kechol Yisrael. And therefore, just because a person had a temporary lapse does not make him a mumar. He has a din of a regular Jew. Afilu imlo asa adayin tshuva, even if he hasn't done tshuva yet. And there, no one would argue that you don't have to spend money. You have to spend money, right? Even if the guy is in the midst of doing an avera temporarily. Okay. And this has all been explained in the laws of Mitzia, that you're not obligated to spend your own money to restore someone's lost property. We did this before in Siman Daled, that if you do spend money, you can charge the person for whatever the costs were, and he will halachically be obligated to make payment for it. Okay, and then let's see, next page. L'rabos amumar l'teyavon. Some say that even a mumar would be counted in the mitzvah of saving a life, even with personal expense. Ve'im humumar l'teyavon l'chol haTorah oruba dino kenachri kidle'el simin dalad sif lamites va'ayin sham be'imrei Yaakov. He says now another exception is that if a person's a mumar for the entire Torah, or the majority of mitzvahs, it's not just that he has this weakness for cheeseburgers, but he just does not live at all like a Jew, doesn't do anything. So, and he's a total Machalel Shabbos and everything. So if it's clear that he knows what he's doing is wrong, so then he has a din of a Gentile, not just a mumar. And there the obligation would be for sure not that you don't have to spend money to save him. So chayavim lahotzi mamon v'chulei hatzalas gufo, and then he brought the opinion that even if a person is a mumar, you still have an obligation to save his life with spending money. Le'el se'if zayin huva machlokas haposkim im chayavim lahotzi kol mamono v'yesh omrim dekevin shuhu lav shein bo ma'isa ina mechuyev lahotzi kol mamono v'yesh cholkem ayin sham divrei maslo v'im lav. We very briefly dwelt on this issue of how much of your money do you have to spend in order to save someone's life. And we pointed out that there's a machlokas over there as to whether you're obligated to give up all of your assets or just a small amount of your assets in order to save someone. And so there's no resolution on that matter. But the point is that, and the reason is because it's a mitzvah lo saseh, where your passivity makes you in violation, not your activity, if you remember that discussion from last week. And so the bottom line is that the Rav Shulchan Aruch brought two different opinions. One opinion is that for a mumar you don't have to spend money. The other opinion is that even for a mumar you have to spend money. And a God-fearing Jew will be stringent like the second opinion. V'chein pasak hagra, and this is how the Vilna Gaon paskin. V'chein kasvu od kama achronim, and many other of the latter poskim have paskin this as well. Le'inyan Yehudi sheragil liknov v'nitfas etzel hanachim. Let's say in the case of a Jew who has a habit of stealing, and he was arrested and put in jail by the Gentile authorities. Now, the question is, in the Gentile jail, this guy is going to get treated with like dreck. He's going to get raped and stabbed, and he'll probably get killed, right? So if he's in that kind of environment where his life is in danger, so the yesh lifdoso afal pi shekarach bahutzos, you should try to bail him out, so that even if the guy committed crimes, but there's a way for you to get him out of prison, but it'll cost money. So the Jewish community should pool their assets and spend money to get the guy out. But that's only if there's a fear that his life is in danger. But that's only if his life is really in danger. If you feel his life is not in danger, like he's a white collar criminal, right? Like, Bernie Madoff, he committed white collar crime, right? And he's in a white collar prison. So then, his life is for sure not in danger. And the Jewish community should feel under no obligation that if a person committed white collar crime, that they should try to spend money to get him out of jail. Well, Moshe's question is about Rubashkin, Shalom Rubashkin. He did wrong things, but he was also apparently, it seems that he was being implicated to be unfairly, right? In other words, they threw the book at him for really that he didn't deserve. He was got compounded sentences that he didn't really deserve. So I think the Jewish community was justified in making efforts to try and get him out early because the punishment did not fit the crime. But at the same time, to make him into a hero was also wrong because the guy was no hero. Okay, we're going to hold it here for today. And Mirza Hashem will do the Likutim and the Biurim, and then we'll move on. Okay?
Shkoyach.
So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.